Hi everyone, my name's Jen Campbell. I'm an author and a book reviewer, and I thought I would start a new reading vlog today. This is going to be a vlog that combines two things which you have been asking me to do and which I thought would pair well together. So many of you have been asking me if I can do a week in my work life type video. I used to film these all the time back in the day because it was more filmable. I'm freelance, I work in the book industry, I write books, I edit books, I run writing workshops, I do lots of different things. And when I was filming those vlogs, I want to say 2017, 2018, I was traveling quite a lot, going to bookshops and festivals, and that was just more exciting for you to watch. These days, I do all of my work from home, which is less exciting for you to watch. I still absolutely love my job, but I appreciate it's not as interesting for aesthetic reasons. You don't get to see lots of different places, so I just tend not to film that kind of thing anymore. So what I'm going to do is, this is going to be a work week in my life vlog. Don't know why I'm doing air quotes. It is a work week in my life vlog, but instead of showing you all the things that I'm doing, I'm just going to chat to you about some of the things that I'm doing. And mainly this is going to be a reading vlog. So mostly we're going to be talking about books, just with a bit of work chat thrown in. I think that'll be more enjoyable for you and easier for me to manage as well. So I have a very busy work week this week, and therefore I want to also make sure that I am reading. I want to make sure that my brain is decompressing and then I'm not sat at my computer all the time. And I thought if I filmed a reading vlog this week, then that would help with that. It always makes my brain feel a bit better if I am intentionally reading. And with that in mind, I thought I would do another vlog that you've been asking me to do, which is a repeat of a reading vlog I did a few years ago, where I read for 2 hours every day. Not in a 2-hour chunk. In fact, I think it was mostly 15 minutes here, 20 minutes there, half an hour there, but just making sure that I was scheduling time for reading during the day. So I have gone through my shelves this morning and picked out 8 books that I would like to read this week. I don't know if I'll get to all of them. I picked 8 because they're mostly very short. It's not 8 huge books. That would be ridiculous. And we'll see how many we can get through in this particular week. I'm just looking at the stack of books in front of me. My aim when I was picking books out was to pick books that felt a bit comforting, but now looking at them, it makes sense to me as to why they're comforting, but I'm not sure that everyone else will find them comforting. But these are ones that I think will just settle, as I said, my brain and make me feel good this week. So these are the books that are on my TBR. This one I think is a comforting book everyone would agree with. This is Garlic and the Witch by Bree Paulson. This is a graphic novel. It's the second in a series, though I assume you probably can read them in any order. I will read it and report back, but I read the first one earlier this year, which is Garlic and the Vampire. It's about a garlic, and she, in the first one, is asked if she will go and chase away a vampire who is apparently terrorizing the locals, and she's really nervous. She doesn't want to do it. She doesn't think she's good enough. She doesn't think she has the nerves and the stamina to be able to do it, but everyone thinks it has to be her because she's a garlic and the folklore that surrounds her kind and vampires means she should be the one. It was super cute, super adorable. This is middle grade, but you know, middle grade is for everybody. So that's one of them. Then I have this non-fiction book by Emily Urquhart. I read her book Beyond the Pale when it came out in 2015, 2016. Loved it so much that I blurred the cover of it when it came out in the UK here. That book was about the history of the link with folklore and albinism, which she was researching because her daughter Sadie has albinism. And this is again linked with folklore. It's called Ordinary Wonder Tales. And this is about modern day folklore, I think. We recorded a podcast together in 2016 where she was talking about this book, which was in its very early iterations. And she was talking about folklore surrounding nuclear power. In here, let me see the blurb. It says that Urquhart reveals the truths that underlie our imaginings, what we see in our heads when we read, how the sight of a ghost can heal, how the entrance to the underworld can be glimpsed in an oil painting or a winter storm, or the onset of a loved one's dementia. In essays on death and dying, pregnancy and prenatal genetics, radioactivity, chimeras, cottages and plague, Ordinary Wonder Tales reveals the essential truth. If you let yourself look closely, there is magic in the everyday. I mean, this is just my kind of thing, isn't it? So I'm very excited about that. Then I thought I would read one of the Pushkin Japanese novellas, the old set, because I've been collecting some of the new editions which are coming out this year, and this is one of the ones from the set that came out in, I want to say 2017, that I haven't read yet, which is Spring Garden by Tomoka Shibasaki, and this is translated from the Japanese by Polly Barton, who we love on this channel. I've heard mixed reviews of this one, and I don't know if it's going to be a bit twee. If it is twee, it's not going to be to my taste, but I would like to give it a go. It's about a man who lives in an apartment block, and he becomes a bit obsessed with a woman who I think lives in the flat above. But I think they're all about to be asked to leave, or have been asked to leave. Yes, it says Taro lives alone in one of the few occupied apartments in his block, a block that is to be torn down as soon as the remaining tenants leave. So I always love books, or I always think or hope to love books that are set in apartment blocks. I just like that premise, that setting, and I like that tension of this home being torn down. So I'll see what I think of this one. And then I have 3 books that relate in some way to disability. So we've got Some of Us Just Fall by Polly Atkin, and I love her poetry. I read her book Recovering Dorothy earlier this year also, which was longlisted for the Barbellion Prize. This is a non-fiction book about disability and nature, and Polly's relationship with nature as a disabled person. Then we have In the Province of the Gods by Kenny Fries. This is about Kenny visiting Japan and about eating food there and visiting gardens, and then also being diagnosed as HIV positive. And I think it's also about disabled gods too. It just sounds really intriguing. Obviously disability, Japan, all things that I am very passionate about. Then we have one of the 404 Inklings books. This is Exploring and Educating on Blindness, Blind Spot by Maud Rowell. This is also linked to Japan a little bit. It says, in Blind Spot, Maud Rowell challenges readers to think differently about what they may take for granted, carrying them on a whirlwind tour through time and space, from Japanese tube stations to the 18th century museum, to showcase what the world looks like for someone who does not see. Then I have 2 poetry collections. This is Yvonne Reddick's Burning Season, which I hauled not that long ago. I want to read it around this time because the cover is very autumnal, but this is nature poetry, whilst also discussing the fact that the author's father, who is the person who introduced her to nature walks and loving nature, is also someone who works in the fossil fuel industry, and she's trying to reconcile both of these things in her head through poetry. And then I would love to read a copy of Modern Poetry in translation. I saw today that Karani Baraka said that they are leaving as editor of this journal, which is a shame. And this is one that they have edited. This is the food issue. So poetry in translation with a focus on food, which just sounds delightful. I love reading about food. I just do. It makes my heart happy. So those are 8 books that I am hoping to get to this week, reading for at least 2 hours a day if possible. I'm not going to be hugely strict about it. As I said, I have a very busy work week this week, but I just like setting myself challenges like this sometimes, and just it helps me focus. So that's what we're going to be doing. So today it is Monday, and 11 o'clock this morning I have a call with Charlotte Eichler, who I'm doing an event with tomorrow. This is her book Swimming Between Islands. We are doing an event with Portobello Books in Edinburgh, and we're both talking about our new poetry collection. So my new poetry collection is called Please Do Not Touch This Exhibit, and Charlotte and I have known each other for a while. I was going to say taught her before. That implies it was in a classroom. It was not, but I have run writing workshops one-on-one with her previously, and have helped edit her work before, and I just love the way that she writes. We write about very similar themes: folklore, girlhood, the sea. It's going to be, I think, a very interesting conversation tomorrow night, because we just have so much in common when it comes to the way that we write. In fact, when I was going through her book this morning ahead of our phone call, I was matching up poems that I think we could read side by side tomorrow night that will bounce off each other quite well. So yeah, we need to have a meeting just to decide loosely what the format for our event is going to be tomorrow night, because we're chairing it ourselves, so we need to know what's happening. So that's what I'm doing this morning, and then this afternoon I need to give feedback to writers who've been taking part in some of my individual one-on-one writing workshops, so that's going to take up the entire afternoon. I will link my writing workshops in the description box down below if you're ever curious. At the moment, I'm not running any group writing workshops, but I do run one-on-one workshops via email all year round. And as I said, I have feedback to give to many people today who have been taking those. So that's what my day looks like today. Planning for an event tomorrow, and then doing editorial work this afternoon, and also email admin because it is Monday and emails will have come in over the weekend. I am going to crack on with work. This evening I will hopefully be reading because that is the plan, and then tomorrow morning I'll come back and check in with you about what I read tonight. In the meantime, I'm going to leave you with a clip of this cat which I saw in Highgate Cemetery last week and I thought was rather adorable. So here is that, and I will see you tomorrow. Hello, good morning. I think that you have something on the lens, or rather I have put something on the lens. You didn't put it there. There we go. Is that better? Can you see better? I hope I haven't just smudged the lens. Okay, it is Tuesday morning. I read all of Garlic and the Witch by Brie Paulson last night, and I also read a bit of Ordinary Wonder Tales by Emily Urquhart, and then read a bit more of this morning in bed with a cup of tea. And I'm having a great time so far, and I feel like I'm breaking some sort of curse because I think in recent reading vlogs, the first book I've ended up reading has not been a book that I have enjoyed, but I loved one of them and I'm really loving the one that I'm currently reading. So, Garlic and the Witch by Brie Paulson, as I mentioned in the last clip, is the second in, I think it's going to be a duology. I don't know if there are going to be more in the series. And you do kind of have to read this one second. I mean, feel free to read it first, but it will spoil something in the first book. But I love this one even more than the first one. I don't know if it was the mood that I was in, or if this one, I think, perhaps plot-wise is just a little bit better. I think that the execution is wonderful. The art style is the same as last time. So yes, this is about a little bulb called Garlic, and she has been grown in this witch's garden. She can talk, she can help the witch look after the rest of the garden, and then she is sent away, well, not sent away, she is sent to go to a magical market to get some ingredients for the witch. And also she thinks that she's turning into a human, and she's not really sure how she feels about that. So this is an adventure story, but it's really about identity and growing up and how unsettling that can be. It's got queer representation in here as well. If you like the Tea Dragon Society, then you will really love this series of books too. It just has that same heart to it. It's really warm, gentle, loved it. And then I picked up Ordinary Wonder Tales by Emily Urquhart. And this is a series of personal essays which are thematically linked because they all relate in some way to folklore and Emily's obsession with folklore, which I love. In the first story, she's talking about her memory of a ghost that appeared to her when she was living in France for a year because her father was on secondment. And it was rumoured that the house that she was living in was haunted, well, really the specific bedroom that she was in. And it was a child ghost, or a ghost child, which doesn't mean that it is the ghost of a child, but it's a ghost that only appears to children. And she had nightmares about it for ages. And in this essay, she decides to contact other people who have also seen that ghost in that room, but she doesn't know them very well at all. It's not as if they've had conversations about this previously. She's just heard that this is not a standalone event. Other people have said it too. And she's talking about how some elements of folklore or storytelling are more accepted than others, and how seeing a ghost is maybe one of the least accepted versions of folklore, and why that may be the case. And she's looking at it from a really distant point of view, I suppose. She's talking about it in a scholarly, interested kind of way. This isn't a I'm going to terrify you ghost story type thing. It's just looking at what folklore is all about, I suppose, the stories that we tell to explain things that cannot be explained. So that is the first story. The second story in the book is called Lessons for Female Success, and it touches on her time working at a summer camp when she was younger and how she was told to sand away the name of someone who used to go to the camp who would autograph above his bed, because he is a convicted rapist now and they don't want his name, obviously, in any of the cabins. So she goes around removing his name. And then later, much later, she hears a story that someone's telling about how, did you know, a sexual predator used to go to this camp and his name was everywhere and then they had to get rid of it. And the way that that story is told has become almost folkloric, but Emily knows it's true because she's the person who erased that name. And then she links this in with discussions to do with female body in folklore and how it was primarily women who were telling these tales, but then men who wrote them down, like who holds the power when it comes to stories and their lasting impact. I thought that was fascinating. And then an essay that made me cry was Child Unwittingly Promised, in which Emily is talking about being pregnant with her second child, her son, and her daughter Sadie has albinism. So when she was pregnant with her son, she was offered testing to see if he also had albinism, and she's asked or told that if she wants the testing she has to sign a form, and she's told that if she signs the form that she is committing to having a termination if the test is positive, because of the funding. Like, they won't fund the test unless she's going to take action. They say, the doctor says, the provincial government does not fund in vitro testing for parents seeking knowledge like us, only those seeking action. Determining whether your baby will have a genetic condition as a means of preparing for that child is not deemed necessary or cost effective. But then her doctor says, but don't worry, we won't actually hold you to that, so just sign the form anyway. And she's in this awful position where he's saying one thing and this legal form is saying another thing, and she links it in with the fairy tale where someone promises their land to the devil, not realizing their daughter is standing outside and she is on that land, all apart from her hands, which get cut off. So she feels like she's making a pact with the devil. The language that Emily uses when she's talking about this is so beautiful. I want to read a little bit to you. They don't hold you to it. Had the form and my signature been meaningless from the beginning? If so, why make women agree to these violent terms? Why make them sign away their babies, even in theory? I notice a crease of consternation forming between the counsellor's brows. Our genetics are tangled and feral, and the more I understood about my human self, the wilder I became. Knowledge had illuminated the forest that lives within me. It had revealed the intimate network of roots and branches, vines and weeds, all interwoven and impossible to tame. Alive, yes, but also ancient and connected to ghosts. I sensed that the counsellor knew that I was upset, but she remained silent too. I wasn't able to ask her any of my questions anyway. The nurse at the registration desk called my name. If you have read my book, Please Do Not Touch This Exhibit, I think, and enjoyed it, I think you will enjoy Ordinary Wonder Tales. There are definite parallels looking at folklore, disability, motherhood, would-be motherhood. And that particular essay reminded me of the poem When I Revisit This Room, I Want to Leave Again, which is also about talking to a geneticist who is very insensitive and talking about disability and funding. And yes, so I really, really felt that one in my soul. Here's another extract. I am lying in the dark, surrounded by a forest of green bodies. Above where I lie, the half moon of a surgical lamp is suspended from the ceiling, illuminating my body on the table. The attending doctor is a green man with a tiny miner's lamp strapped to his head, a blinding star whose light will act as his guide. There is an ultrasound machine placed on my belly, and the baby's heartbeat drums through this small, crowded space. The other green bodies are students and nurses and the ultrasound technician. It's just beautiful. Oh, and I also felt this line in my soul of doctors asking for your medical history. The doctors are usually in a rush. They ask for the story, but they are not prepared to sit for the length it takes to tell it. Yes, I think this is going to be one of my favourite books of the year. I don't want to jinx it. I haven't finished reading it. I've got about a third left, so I will finish reading this evening. So this morning I have been reading through these. I can't show them to you, but these are pieces of work for a book that I am putting together with another person for Faber, which is coming out in 2025. So I am the editor of this book, and it has been a project that we've been working on for 18 months now, I want to say. And it's something that I felt very overwhelmed by at the beginning, because it is quite a difficult project to tackle, and I'm having to be boringly vague about it, I'm sorry. But I have been working on this project for 18 months. I did feel really overwhelmed with it at the beginning, especially feeling the weight of responsibility of what this book is going to be. But now that we are 18 months into it, and it is coming together a little bit, and I can see how it's all going to fit, I'm very excited by it. So I have an editorial meeting this afternoon with my fellow editor and the folk at Faber, so we can go over this and plan next steps. So that's what I've been doing this morning and will be doing this afternoon. I then have the online event that I mentioned yesterday, this evening, with Portobello Bookshop and Charlotte Eichler. So that means I'm going to be working into the evening, and therefore I've decided that I am going to take slightly longer for my lunch and make us some very nice lunch. I'm going to make some dumplings. So I'm going to do that for lunch, editorial meeting, book event this evening online, more reading later tonight, and hopefully catching up with Bake Off as well, because that would be nice. I will insert footage here of me making the dumplings, and I will come back and talk to you tomorrow. Hi, it is Wednesday, and last night I finished reading Ordinary Wonder Tales, and I was correct. This is definitely one of my favourite books of the year. The final few essays touched on nuclear power and folklore, and there was also one that I loved where she was talking about her father and dementia and memories, and that made me remember that she has written another book that I haven't read yet, which I have now ordered, and it's on its way to me. It is called, is it listed in here? Maybe it is not listed in here. Oh yeah, it is. It's called The Age of Creativity, Art, Memory, My Father and Me. So I'm guessing that will be an extension of that essay. I'm not sure which one came first, whether it was that essay or that book, but looking at her father and his experience of dementia and her experience with both of those things, and her dad was an artist as well, so it's a discussion on art as well, so I look forward to reading that. I should say with this book, I guess, content warnings for discussions of pandemics. Also, there are essays on here, as I mentioned previously, about baby loss and ableism as well. I think if you like my work, then you will really enjoy this book. I'd also recommend this for fans of Rebecca Tausig and Lula Ellender, whose work I also really love. Thematically, they're very different, but I just feel like their voices are all very soothing and quite lyrical and have a real emphasis on storytelling. They all feel, as writers, a bit like magpies, jumping between things that they really like to discuss and doing deep dives and linking patterns and all of that. So if you've read any of their work before and enjoyed it, I think that you will like Emily's. And there's also a quote from Amanda Leduc on the back, who wrote Disfigured. So if you like Amanda's book too, I think you will also enjoy this. After reading this, I then picked up Blind Spot, Exploring and Educating on Blindness by Maud Rowell. This is one of the 404 Inklings books, which serve as a introduction to certain topics. So in this, Maud is talking about blindness and she's linking that with accessibility and various other things. And on reflection, I don't think that I am really the target audience for this book, because it covered a lot of ground that I'm already very familiar with, especially disability and disfigurement as represented in the media and what that means, and also looking at accessibility. But I particularly love, personally for me, the discussion on inaccessibility of art galleries and art and discussion on blindness. I thought that that was really fascinating. I also find with these types of books how interesting it is how quickly they date, which is not a criticism of the book, it's just something that's going to happen if you're writing a non-fiction book that includes statistics. And it's quite striking the change that has happened even since this book came out, which is in 2021. Maud referenced a statistic saying that disability hate crimes surged in the UK by 14% 2018 to 2019, but that surge pales in comparison with the surge that happened in the pandemic years, where disability hate crime rose by more than 40%. So I think knowing that and reading this and seeing that stark difference was even more depressing, I think. It is sad how even more inaccessible spaces have become for disabled people in the last few years. So yes, I thought there was lots to love about this book, and I think if you're in particular new to reading disability nonfiction, especially with an emphasis on blindness, then I would very much recommend this book. I'm not sure which one I'm going to pick up next. I don't know why I kind of sang that word as I was saying it. I have a very busy day today. I have to film 2 videos, not for this channel, but for a school in Amsterdam today. I'm filming a video for their younger primary school children about my Franklin and Luna books. If you're new, I have written a series of picture books, the first of which is called Franklin's Flying Bookshop, and these 3 books are about a dragon called Franklin and his best friend Luna. So I'm filming a video doing a reading of one of those books and talking about being a children's author and answering some of their questions. And then for their older primary school students, I'm doing a video on The Sister Who Ate Her Brothers and Other Gruesome Tales, which is a middle grade book where I retold gruesome fairy tales from around the world. So I'm going to be filming a video reading from this, talking about the history of fairy tales and answering questions that they have submitted. So that's going to take up pretty much all of my day. And then I have a meeting this afternoon with the Poetry Book Society, because I'm doing an event with them on Monday night for 2 hours, running a workshop as part of their Young Critic scheme in partnership with the T.S. Eliot Prize, where I'm teaching 10, 16 to 25-year-olds about dissecting, analysing and reviewing poetry. So we're just having a quick meeting so that I can go over what they want their students to get out of this session, then I can plan accordingly. And then this evening I am doing an event with the Buy Plus Lines anthology. This is launched tonight online. It is National Coming Out Day today, and this is the online launch for this anthology, which I am part of. This is a collection of poetry by Buy Plus poets, and this event I think is running from 7:30 until 9 tonight. So it's going to be a late one for me tonight, and I'm not sure how much reading I'm going to get done this evening, but that's okay. I think I've got enough on my plate, and after I finish doing this event, I think probably we'd just quite like to watch an episode of Race Across the World. That's probably what's going to happen, but I'll read a bit in the morning when I wake up in bed, I think, because I like to do that if I can. I tend to wake up quite early, so when the rest of the world is asleep, reading for a little while with a cup of tea is a very nice thing to do. So that is my plan, and I will come back and speak to you tomorrow if I have read something by then. And I should stop filming this clip and get on with the work that I've got to do. So I'll speak to you later. Bye. Hi, it is the next day. I didn't get to read anything last night. I didn't finish work until about 11 o'clock, which I don't love, but it's not a very regular occurrence, so that's okay. It is what it is, and I'm not going to berate myself for having not read anything, because the point of setting this very arbitrary reading goal was to dissuade me from, you know, doing things that I don't particularly want to be doing, like scrolling on my phone, but it was a very valid reason for not having read anything yesterday evening, so that's fine. I read a little bit of Spring Garden this morning before I got up, but really not much at all, so I will check in with you about that tomorrow, because I do not plan to have a late night working tonight, so I would like to read some more, and I am enjoying the beginning of it. It does have that male narrator longingly looking at a woman who he doesn't really know, which verging slightly on Murakami vibes, to be honest, there, but also is written a little bit like a Miyazaki film. So I'm interested to see where it's going, because so far I can forgive the way it's written, but not if it's sustained throughout the whole book, because that would be very dull. So I will let you know what I think as that book progresses. Today I have a meeting this morning with the Society of Authors. I have a long-term freelance job with them, which I really enjoy doing. So I have that this morning. Then after that and into the afternoon, I need to film a video for the Kolkata Literary Festival in India. I'm doing a set reading some poems, so I need to film that video and then edit it, upload it, caption it, and all of that stuff, and send it across to them. And then I need to start, but won't finish today, but I just want to make headway on my Toast article for this month. Every month, as I'm sure you know, because I've spoken about this a lot now, I write articles for Toast, which is a clothing company, but they also have a magazine online. And recently I've been doing a lot of my walking and reading articles, which I used to do every season, but they've asked me to do it every month the rest of this year because they like them, I guess. So I went on the walk early last week, and I decided to walk from Canary Wharf through there and then over the Isle of Dogs, through Mudchute, and then down to Greenwich and Blackheath. I will insert some photos of that walk here. The leaves were starting to turn, but it's still taking a while. It's really rainy today, but it has been the summer weather for quite a long time. So even though this is my October article, which I'd hoped would be really, really autumnal, I think that's going to have to be November's one. But I did enjoy that walk, and that article will be going up at the end of October over on Toast. If you haven't seen these articles that I do before, I take a book on a walk with me, read the book, do the walk, and then I write an article about both the book and the walk, and I make a map and I take some pictures in case, you know, anyone else wants to do the walk too. I appreciate that the walks that I do for Toast are London centric because that's where I live and I can't travel at the moment. But maybe in the future I can get to do walks further afield because that would be nice. and I would enjoy it. So that is my work plan today. I won't finish, as I said, the Toast article probably, but it's not due until next week. I just wanted to make sure that it had begun. And is that it? I feel like maybe that's it, because I don't have any more book chat to share with you. We didn't even get to watch Race Across the World yesterday, but that means that we get to watch it tonight, which I'm looking forward to. I'm going to make us some tacos for lunch, I think. So I will insert some footage of that here, and then I'll come back and speak to you tomorrow. Oh, and P.S. I very much felt like a Disney princess this morning, because I was sitting in my office and a bird flew in through the window. Not a huge bird who was in a panic, but I think it was a blue tit or something. And it sat on my office chair and just looked at me and was like, hey, and then turned around and went back out again like it didn't care. Maybe it pops in all the time and I just don't even know about it. Dunno. I liked it though. It was cool. Anyway, to work. I'll see you later. Hi everyone, I thought I would update you from my office today. I'm wearing a ginger wig because I had to wash my peach wig this morning, and this is a sign that autumn is truly here, because this is normally my autumn winter wig of choice because it's handy to wear with a hat. I wanted to check in with you because I finished reading Spring Garden by Tomoko Shibasaki, which is translated from the Japanese by Polly Barton. I ended up enjoying this. I was liking it at the beginning, but as I said in the last clip, I didn't think I would like it overall if the tone continued in the way that it began, because there was quite a bit of manic pixie dream girl energy, which is, as we know, one of my least favourite kinds of energy, but that dissipated in the book, so we're absolutely fine on that front. This is about a man called Taro, who since the death of his father has been keeping himself to himself. He's become a bit obsessed with this woman that he can see sometimes out of his window, who also lives in his apartment block. He doesn't know her name to begin with, he just calls her Dragon Woman, because all of their apartments are named after signs of the zodiac, and hers is the Dragon apartment, which is just the best apartment to live in, I think. And he keeps imagining what she's like and filling in the blanks and following her around a little bit. But then he actually meets her and realizes that she's called Nishi and she's her own person, and she refuses to let him imprint on her. And we get to hear her story, which takes over the narrative for a while. This book is all about the gap between perception and reality. So for Taro, that's the gap between his perception of Dragon Woman and who Nishi actually is. But then Nishi also has this as well, because she's obsessed with this place called the Blue House, which is just outside their apartment block. And she's longed to go inside it for years because she once saw photos of it in a book, and she's been imagining how wonderful it must be inside. One by one, the characters go through this process of demolition, where they're having to confront the reality of the thing that they have been dreaming about. And this is reflected in the wider imagery of their apartment block being set for demolition and then being told that they need to leave where they live. So they seem to be existing in a very unfixed version of their lives, a very temporary experience. And because of that, they're grasping at unrealistic versions of perfect things. There is quite a lot of telling rather than showing in this book, which I didn't always think was necessary, but thematically I do think fits in with the book, because characters want to tell other characters about their versions of reality as opposed to just existing together. They want to enforce their ideas on other people. We also get a twist in perspective towards the end when we see Taro from someone else's point of view, so he becomes the person that someone is staring at and trying to figure out. I thought that that was really interesting. And then towards the end, We get a TV crew who are filming around the apartment block. And again, that creates an othering distance and another lens to look through that isn't particularly real. And I think there's a lot of things to discuss, to think about. It's a very quiet book at the same time. I would recommend it. If this book appeals to you, then do pick it up. I'm not sure which one I'm going to head to next. Last night we watched the most recent episode of Race Across the World, which I mentioned we'd been hoping to do. If you don't watch that, it's a series where pairs of people are set a task of getting from one place to another place for the price of a plane ticket, but they're not allowed to get on a plane. So in this series, they're going from Marrakesh up to the Arctic Circle, and it's celebrity version this time, which to be honest, I wasn't sure about because I would just prefer to watch people I don't know, but without wanting to be rude, they're not hugely famous people, which I think they had to decide to do because otherwise they would get recognized all the time and people would help them, which is against the spirit of the game. So it's one celebrity, but they're with a family member and they're all competing to get to places quickly and cheaply. And there's something about it that I find quite wholesome. I'm just really, really enjoying it. I also caught up with Bake Off, and I now really want to make Devonshire splits, which are a little like donuts. They're cream buns, I guess. I'll insert a picture here, with fresh cream, jam and strawberries inside. And if I have time, which I think I will, I may make them this weekend, which would be nice. And if I do, I will show you footage of that. I'm aware that my throat is also very croaky today. Sorry, I'm not getting sick. It's just one of the more tame things about having EEC syndrome. You often have a very dry throat. Work-wise today, I am wrapping up admin stuff. I need to send some invoices for work I did this week. You may see these books on the floor over here. These need to be packaged up to go back to the person who runs Inclusive Books for Children, which is an organisation I've been working with for about 6 months that I spoke about in my last wrap up. I've reviewed all of these in the last month and now they need to go back to her. I'm also going to be editing a whole poetry collection for someone this afternoon as well. So today is mostly heavy on the editorial stuff. Speaking of heavy, the news is obviously very, very heavy this week. This vlog, as with any vlog, is a snapshot of my week and is a very specific look at aspects of my week. There's lots of news reading and discussions going on off screen, as I'm sure is the case for you, and I am sending lots and lots of love to everyone. I'm gonna get on with work and try to focus, and I will check in with you all tomorrow. Hi, it is Sunday, so I am going to wrap up this video here because, well, at the end of this clip, because it's the day that this video is going out. As you saw in the last clip, I did get round to making Devonshire splits and they were super yummy. I made up the recipe based on like how I know how to make enriched dough and they worked out really well. So I'll say the recipe here, but I'll also write it in the description box because that is probably the most helpful thing to do. But the dough is just 250 grams of white bread flour, 250 grams of plain flour, a sachet of 7 grams of the yeast, 4 tablespoons of caster sugar, 2 eggs, and 200 milliliters of milk with 100 grams of butter melted in it. And you just knead all of that together, leave it to rise for an hour, then split into 9 equal dough balls. I use the scales for this. Normally I don't. If I'm making things like cinnamon buns, I don't bother, but for something that is like this, I think to get an even bake it is good to weigh them all out. So split it into 9 roughly the same size, made into dough balls, put those on a baking tray, left to rise for another hour, then put them in the oven for 15 minutes on 180 because I've got a fan oven, 200 if you don't. And yeah, they were really lovely. Then you just cut out a little triangle in the middle, a triangle of the dough, and fill it with jam, cream, top with strawberries and sprinkle with icing sugar. And we had a couple yesterday, and then I froze all of the others so that I wasn't tempted to eat all of them all at once. So they're in the freezer, and I find that if you freeze bread made things in particular, as soon as they've cooled after you've cooked them, obviously without cutting them open or filling them with cream, just the bread bit, and freeze them straight away, then they freeze quite well. So yeah, that was a success. I am here to talk to you about the final book. I didn't get around to reading all the 8 books that were on my list. So the ones that I still have yet to get to are Burning Season by Yvonne Reddick. I've started reading modern poetry in translation, but not really enough that I have things to say to you about it. And I still haven't read In the Province of the Gods by Kenny Fries. I'm going to keep these on my TBR for this month, and maybe I'll get to them and then I'll talk about them in my end of month wrap up, because I don't think I'm going to dive straight into Halloween reading from now, so I may still get to them, but we shall see. But I have been reading Some of Us Just Fall by Polly Atkin. I'm about a third of the way through this one, and as predicted, I'm very much enjoying it. I would recommend this for fans of Ill Feeling by Alice Hattrick, if you've read that Fitzcarraldo book. Polly is writing in this about growing up as a disabled person, but doctors not knowing what is, in inverted commas, wrong with you, and how exhausting that diagnosis process is, and the gaslighting that happens in the medical industry. So many doctors telling her that there was nothing wrong with her at all and it was all just in her head. She has Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and she had so many dislocations and breaks as a child. She also had many other things going on in her body as well. And some of the things that doctors say, just... One doctor in a gynecology department said it was so difficult, I'm paraphrasing, so difficult to see what was going on inside women's bodies sometimes, just because there's so much stuff in there. And the next paragraph has Polly saying, actually I will read it to you because it did make me laugh, her sarcasm. But yeah, he said there's just so much in there. I imagine radiologists poring over CT scans of women's abdomens stuffed with space junk, tin cans, old bicycles, the Loch Ness Monster, and an actual kitchen sink. Yes, I really appreciate her sense of humour in this, whilst also delving into medical history and talking about medical trauma and talking about ableism in the medical field, and pairing that with a discussion on nature. That in particular is my favourite bit. She's also talking a bit about literature in here as well. She lives in the Lake District, so it's always a joy to read about that. This is her writing about the Lake District. I know if I trust it, it will always show me something. A view I haven't seen before, a red stag backlit by a low winter sun, an ocean of bluebells moving in waves, a bird that is said not to live here anymore. And then she's also talking about being kind to her younger self and understanding and processing what her younger self went through. She says, I have carried that toddler, herself, her younger self, I have carried that toddler with a broken leg around for over 40 years now, but I am still only beginning to understand a little more about her, about us, about how we came to be us. I'm trying to carry her more lightly, to bear less of her pain and more of her casual, blithe resilience. I am trying to listen. So again, I think if you have read and enjoyed Please Do Not Touch This Exhibit, you will also really enjoy Polly's book, Some of Us Just Fall, on nature and not getting better. And I'm looking forward to reading the rest of the book. And I'll talk about it in more detail at the end of the month in my wrap up. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. I hope I was able to provide a little bit of respite. As I mentioned on Friday, I find it extra weird sometimes to film content like this and talk about books, even though this is my job and this is what I do, when the news is so heavy. I trust that everyone is keeping up to date with what is happening from trusted sources and is writing to MPs and donating where they can. I'm sending lots and lots and lots of love to you all, and I will see you for another video next Sunday.